Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. This week's Torah portion tells the story of Isaac and his wife, Rivka, who after their marriage, they could not conceive. And they prayed to God to have a child. But when the Torah talks about their praying, the Torah says, Vayetar Yitzchak L'Hashem. Isaac prayed to God, L'nochach ishto, facing his wife. And our rabbis explain, what does it mean that he prayed facing his wife? That each one stood in their own corner of the room and prayed to have a child, until they were ultimately blessed with twins, 2 boys, Jacob and Esau. But the rabbis make a point of explaining that they didn't pray as individuals. They prayed together as a couple. And that's when their prayers were answered. And the message is that a husband and wife should be praying not just together, but for one another. Each one should pray on behalf of the other. So Isaac said, God, maybe I don't deserve to have a child, but my wife, surely she should be blessed with a child. And Rebecca said the same thing about her husband Isaac. And it's their joint prayer that was answered. Today in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, there are over 5,000 Chabad rabbis at the annual convention of Chabad emissaries worldwide. Now, the story of Chabad is a phenomenal story. The Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson took leadership of the Chabad movement in 1951 upon the passing of his father-in-law. He had a little synagogue, a little congregation in Brooklyn. But then he began his outreach worldwide. He didn't just see his mission to build a community in Brooklyn, but to build communities throughout the entire globe. And upon the Rebbe's passing, in 1994, there were 1,200 Chabad emissaries worldwide, which is quite an accomplishment. But many people predicted the demise of Chabad, because now that the Rebbe passed away, and the Rebbe was the inspiration behind the movement, how could the movement continue to grow without a leader? And here we are, 31 years later, and now there are 5,000 Chabad emissaries. The amount of emissaries quadrupled since the Rebbe's passing. And there isn't a Jewish family in the world, I would say, that has not been impacted by Chabad on some level. Every single Jew around the world has been touched by a Chabad emissary of the Rebbe, whether it's them or their children on campuses or their grandchildren in Jewish day schools. And literally there isn't a Jew who hasn't traveled somewhere around the world where the only place to find a Jewish community was the local Chabad center. And how did the Rebbe accomplish this? And what is the secret to the success of Chabad? And I believe one of the secrets is exactly this week's Torah portion. You see, the Rebbe never sent rabbis out as emissaries. He always sent couples, a husband and wife team, as they were called shluchim and shluchot, the Rebbe's emissaries. When you know a Chabad rabbi, you don't just know the rabbi, you know his wife, you know his children. Often people will talk about their Chabad rabbi and mention his name right alongside her name. Beryl and Chani, or David and Nechama, because they work as a couple. You see, we read about the first Jewish couple, Abraham and Sarah, and their success in building a Jewish nation. But prior to Abraham, we had the story of Noah. Noah was also charged by God to bring people closer to serving God and righteousness and morality. But he failed. Why did he fail? And perhaps the reason is because we don't even know his wife's name. We know Noah and his wife. We don't even know her name. But Abraham goes right in hand with Sarah. They were a team. They were a couple. When you got invited to Abraham, you didn't get just invited to hear a Torah lecture or to be preached to. You got invited to a hot meal in the tent of Abraham and Sarah, and they showed you how Judaism is lived, not just preached, but practiced as a family. And that's the same thing with Chabad. The Rebbe sent out families, not to build synagogues, but to build families, Jewish communities. And you meet the rabbi and his wife and the children, and you see Judaism come alive in real time, how it's observed, how it's practiced, how it's celebrated. And that's what draws Jews closer to the beauty of Judaism. I'll never forget, amongst the many couples that came to Palm Beach Synagogue and many visitors, one went on to become fully observant, a young man and his wife. And he shared with me once what inspired him to become observant. And he said the first Shabbat he ever came with his wife to a Shabbat dinner at the synagogue. There was a beautiful family that was visiting from New York. And he saw this father and this mother and 4 children, and they sat around the table. They were all sitting beautifully, dressed magnificently for Shabbat. And he watched the father make Kiddush, and the way the mother and the children listened and answered Amen. And he watched the way the parents blessed the children. And he watched the way the father and mother interacted with the children, sharing words of Torah on the Shabbat table. And all he could think about, he says, was my family on a Friday night. So when I grew up, this one was watching TV in one room, this one was playing video games in the other room. He says, I saw this cohesive, beautiful family keeping Shabbat. And he said, this is what I want for myself. I want to have a Shabbat table with my children sitting around the table, with my wife, discussing meaningful subjects from the weekly Torah portion, singing beautiful songs and prayers, blessing my children, dressed like a royal family around the Shabbat table. He went on to not only become observant, but to have a beautiful family. And today, he's not just a parent, he and his wife are grandchildren to a beautiful Jewish family. That's the secret of Isaac and Rebekah praying together. And that's what the Rabbi said, let's build not just synagogues, let's build Jewish homes and one big extended Jewish family. Have a wonderful day.